I'm watching. It is now 5 o'clock, and I will officially call the Richland County Development and Services Committee meeting to order. That is our first item of business. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Derek Pugh,
Yes.
Teratio, Barron,
Yes.
English,
Present.
Newton.
Oh, I'm just following
Here.
Susan. Here, we're here.
Yes, Ms. Barron is here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. And I will just note that Ms. Teresio was out of town for business and is currently en route to our meeting. She's experiencing a little more traffic than she thought, but she would probably be joining us before too long. That brings us to item number 2, the approval of the minutes. Are there any additions, changes, or deletions? And I'll welcome Councilwoman Teresio, who is joining us virtually as well. And I'll entertain a motion regarding the minutes.
Move to approve.
It's been moved and properly seconded to approve the minutes. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Pugh,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Item 3 is the adoption of the agenda. Are there any additions or changes?
No recommended changes, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So move. Approve. Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Will you call the roll?
Pugh,
Yes.
Teratio, Barron,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Ms. Teresio, it sounded like you may have wanted to say something. I know it can be hard to unmute yourself while traveling. All right.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to vote.
Thank you. That brings us to our item for action. We have several items for discussion. Our first item for action is from the Department of Public Works Engineering Division to grant right-of-way for Briarsgate Circle. It is on your agenda from pages 8 to 14. Is there a staff member that wants to briefly speak to that?
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Newton. If I can just turn your attention to page 9, I believe it is, of your packet, under the Strategic and General Discussion section, where it says the South Carolina Department of Transportation is requesting 809 square feet of the southern portion of the county-maintained road, Briarsgate Circle, at the intersection of Broad River Road to be transferred to their ownership for the realignment of the I-20 interchange known as the Carolina Crossroads Project. An exhibit is attached illustrating the request. The northern connection of Briarsgate Circle to Broad River Road is signalized and will be improved to accommodate traffic. The southern connection of Briarsgate Circle to Broad River Road will be closed since this is part of the new I-20 on-ramp. Public Works, Community Planning and Development, Emergency Management, and the Sheriff's Department has reviewed the request, and the county staff as a whole has no opposition, and so we are recommending approval of this item.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. And did I read the documents correctly that we are granting this right-of-way for the grand total of $1?
That's correct.
Do we have to charge? I was just curious because I know that we were just granting it, so.
I think that's a common practice where in order to meet certain standards,
Gotcha.
the dollar amount is used.
Madam Chair, it has to be for some amount, even nominal, so that's why you have the dollar, which is a nominal amount.
And we'll be putting that straight into the general fund? We're watching, just asking. Too soon, Pew, too soon. Are there any questions from the body? I'll entertain a motion.
So move, Madam Chair.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Pugh,
Yes.
Teratio, Barron,
Yes.
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Then that brings us to item 5, items for discussion and preliminary action. And yay, this is my motion. I move to direct the administrator to conduct a review of the rank weeds and vegetation ordinance and recommend any updates that would improve the effectiveness of the ordinance, particularly as it relates to safety, enforcement, and blight reduction. I know that at our last meeting, staff wanted to incorporate some suggestions from the Sheriff's Department. Is there a staff member who would like to speak to this item? You're on your own, Mr. Brown?
I am not the best person to speak to this item. I know that there's information in your packet. I can certainly go through that, Ms. Newton. The updates that are included do address some changes that speak to, some of it was the language that our staff communicated was we were using nomenclature as if you look on page 15 of your document under the executive summary, where the initial draft of the ordinance was prepared. They talk about the need to address the language. So rank vegetation is no longer common industry nomenclature. The terminology now used is unsafe and noxious vegetation. That information was part of the requested updates. Also, there was communication here, looking at item 3, that Clemson University Agriculture Extension maintains a periodically updated list of plants that are invasive and noxious to South Carolina, so that while this list is not a regulatory document, council could adopt it or create a Richland County specific list so that you're talking about the specific things that you believe the ordinance should address as it relates to unsafe and noxious vegetation. And then they talked about that the ordinance makes no distinction between residential and commercial properties. And as a result of that, but there's no stated reason as to why that exists. And I think that was some of the question that the Sheriff's Department had as to when they were looking to address properties, that they were trying to figure out how to address these undifferentiated areas. As a result of that, it says that the existing ordinance excludes undeveloped residential properties from being declared a nuisance, but not undeveloped commercial properties. So that's another area that we need to define. So the proposed, the language is to replace these sections with language defining rural and developed properties, which is a more useful distinction, and for the committee to discuss what standards are appropriate for each. As you kind of roll out to the actual document in your packet, which I believe is listed on page 17, it does kind of show a few red line items there, but ultimately, Ms. Newton, that's the executive summary and some of the areas that the ordinance addresses, which we know doesn't really address some of the unsafe issues that we were trying to get to from neighbor to neighbor, but that could not be conducted with this particular ordinance document.
Thank you. And so I have questions, and I want to open it up to questions from the body. But first, just want to be clear on, this is presented here as items for discussion and for preliminary action. So wanted to understand what staff was suggesting as the outcome of this meeting as it relates to this item.
Sure, so that we actually take some definitive steps to discuss, how you wanted to, like, if you take a look at those 4 particular items, one, that we do acknowledge that we are looking to change and update the name of our ordinance as to what it's addressing, so that would be a preliminary action step. That we also talk about whether or not we wanted to adopt, for example, the listing that from Clemson University that was suggested as a list of plants that are invasive and noxious to South Carolina, so that gets included into the ordinance, or that you communicate whether or not you wanted the county to adopt or create its own list to include or something of that nature. Also, that you take if you wanted to take some action on providing the ability for the existing ordinance to be changed to include dealing with undeveloped commercial properties, so that you give the Sheriff's Department and other code enforcement entities within Richland County the ability to address not only residential properties, as the ordinance talks about, but commercial properties. So those are some of the preliminary actions that staff would foresee potentially taking place as a result of this committee meeting on today.
Thank you. I will look to the body to see if they have any questions, and I'll recognize Councilwoman Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to the staff, thanks for giving us some updates on proper terminology. But I do think that I welcome the idea of adopting the Clemson document. However, I say that very loosely because I would like to see the document. So before we adopt it, I think that, if someone's already done the work for us, then, to have that document and as a part of, I guess, our ordinance would be helpful. While at the same time, I don't know enough about plants besides how to kill them, than to know that, okay, what's specific to Richland County or not. And if, I guess if someone brings a plant in from another part of the, the country, now it's growing here and it's not included. So I don't think that I would be opposed to, doing something specific, but I would do something general. And if the staff could just provide us with that document, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other information or questions from the body? Then, thank you. And I do have sorry, Ms. English, were you raising your hand? You're recognized.
Please forgive me. I have my glasses on. Never mind.
Life is hard sometimes without the eye gear. So I do have a few questions, and I take Ms. Barron's suggestion in terms of seeing the noxious plant list. I guess I didn't suggest it because the only thing I do know about plants is how to kill them. And so as a non-expert on horticulture, I don't have anything to opine there except that we're happy to accept staff's recommendation. I guess for me, my original intent in making the motion didn't necessarily take into noxious or invasive species, so I'll just accept whatever the best practice was. I just want people's neighborhoods to look nice. So however it is that we do that, that works for me. So just a few questions, and I'll just try to say them together. One is that this draft ordinance specifically refers to properties that are zoned rural. We know that that terminology is going to change as part of our land development code, and so wanted to make sure that that was updated appropriately. Of course, any changes to our ordinance is going to require 3 readings and a public hearing, and so that, my understanding is, would align with our new codes. So wanted to make sure that we update that appropriately, and then also wanted to maybe have someone speak to that distinction between commercial properties, residential properties, and vacant properties to see, what the recommendation is on the best practice. I know that I emailed staff not long ago because I passed by a residential property where the house had burned down and the vegetation was taller than my tallest child, and so wasn't sure about that. And since we want, again, our communities to look nice, whether it's a vacant lot or business or residence, my desire would be that they are all obligated to follow our codes. And if there are any questions about that or concerns about what the best practice would be, I'd like to hear that. And then I have one more question where the answer is going to be no, but I have to ask anyway. Hi, Mr. Jensen.
Hello,
You're
ma'am.
recognized.
Thank you. Very simply, as to the rural versus urban versus residential versus commercial distinction, our code in the past basically dealt with distinctions between, well, let me put it this way. The distinctions weren't real clear, And in speaking with the Richland County Sheriff Department, they had some concerns that their hands were tied in some issues where they wanted to pursue enforcement, but they couldn't. And so what they have recommended to us and what Attorney Ziegler has recommended is what you see in your text there. However, it could be stricter in the sense that if it was the committee's and the council's desire to include residential structures and residential development within the nuisance definition, we could do that as long as we didn't run afoul of South Carolina State Code. And that's something that I do not know enough about, that I will rely on the county attorney's office to make sure that we keep ourselves within our bounds.
Okay, so apart from any concerns that our legal team may find, are there any other concerns that you have about taking that step where all properties are required to not be nuisances?
That is really a broad policy question, if I may reply. Every jurisdiction is different. Everywhere I've worked has had a different thought on that. Some communities do not want to fight or let me put it this way. When you're dealing with residential structures, particularly, somebody's home, they tend to react differently than if it's a commercially owned property, where it's more of a financial, situation rather than an emotional one. And so every jurisdiction handles that differently, and that's all I can say is that it's really the purview of the body if they want to treat all properties the same or if they want to treat certain situations distinctly.
Thank you, Mr. Jensen. Mr. Brown, you're recognized.
And I would say to Mr. Jensen's point, the county has already taken a stance on blight remediation. It has been an ongoing goal initiative that the county has talked about being a part of. And so as it relates to property and the upkeep of it, as long as we're within the bounds, I don't see there being any issue with taking the position that the ordinance applies to properties within the bounds of Richland County. Just that cut and dry.
Thank you. So I guess one of my questions would be if those conversations could be had with legal, and if this language that we have is fine as it is and clear enough as it is, otherwise if we can make it easier for enforcement. I mean, are you looking to say, is this type of residence or that type of residence, just to apply those? I don't think I was very clear, but in my heart I was. So if you could have that conversation about what types of distinctions we need to make versus having a unifying one, that would be information that I'd like to see. And then two more questions. This isn't the question I'm going to get a no to, but as it relates to liens, I guess I'm confused because there's language in the ordinance that says if Richland County has to come in and remediate your blight, we can put a lien on your property. And so I know that municipalities have broader authority in terms of levying fines for that type of thing. So I guess I'm wondering if someone could explain what is our real authority as it relates not just to applying a lien, but lien enforcement and payment.
I would defer to the county attorney on that matter.
Well, as far as enforcement, pretty much the lien is, when there's a lien, the only thing you can do is it's on basically the title of the property. Like when the property can't be sold without the lien being paid, basically.
So it's something
not
that
like-
happens at the end of the process as
Right.
opposed to immediately when we incur the cost.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. So that's not something like there's a lien, we can make them pay.
You can't add to their tax bill, which
Right.
they would have to pay annually.
Right.
Okay. And then I guess my final
Ms.
question,
Newton.
oh, sorry, yes, Councilwoman
Can I just
Barron.
insert something here
Please.
to that? So if we wanted to levy fines, what is the process that could we do that? Because like, for instance, the city of Columbia, they have fines that they issue for this same thing. So if we wanted to do something similar, what is the process there? Because I hear what Ms. Newton's saying, and it's ongoing in my district, and I would love to be able to, to have something that really has right now consequences.
May I answer that question? Because it's a fun answer. Welcome to the disparities between counties and cities. The state legislature would have to change the law, and we have people who are advocating for that.
Yeah.
We are not legally allowed to do that.
Okay, so my next question would be for Mr. Brown, and that would be, we have a lobbyist that could work on our behalf for something like this?
We do, and the State Association of Counties position, one of their positions is to get the same authority afforded to municipalities to be afforded to the counties. So there's a policy position that they'll be discussing. They've discussed at the local meeting that they had, and they'll be discussing at their legislative conference where they established the policy positions of SCAC for the year.
Glad to hear.
And any citizen who is watching at home, you can talk to your state house representative and your state senator and tell them that you'd like to see consequences when people leave blight in your neighborhood. All right. Are there any other questions from staff that you need input on us from that will allow you to go back and tweak the ordinance recommendations?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. Anything else from the body? Going once. All right. That brings us to our items pending analysis, no action required. Item 6A, direct the administrator to research and present council current laws and benefits of enacting impact fees in Richland County. The purpose is to help reduce the tax burden on residents by not having to pay the complete cost of development in Richland County. Mr. Jensen sat down, so I'll just repeat our conversation and see if the body has any questions. You can see in your agenda packet that staff has prepared an RFP to bring in a consultant to make recommendations, because what we are allowed to do by state law is not necessarily as comprehensive as what some of us might wish or think as it relates to impact fees. And I'll specifically say in my conversation with Mr. Jensen that the RFP was geared towards how can we get information on what the law says, what we can do, what other governments and municipalities are doing in a thorough way, but not having us drop hundreds of thousands of dollars for somebody to come back and say, you can't do anything. So it was focused on getting us the information that we need in an expedited way. So I will pause and see if there are questions from the body or if the staff wants to add additional information. I did have a question about the timeline, if no one else does. The way that I read this, it seemed like there were two timelines at once. On the one hand, it said that it was going to take 2 months to get a vendor. And on the other hand, it said we were going to have a vendor by December. I guess it depends on how you look at when the month starts and how long it takes. But given the holidays, are we truly optimistic that before the end of the year, we will have a vendor selected and approved by council? Mr. Jensen, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Whether or not it'll come before council by then, I do not know, but I think we will have a vendor. I mean, this is a relatively specialized field.
Okay.
There are only a handful out there, and we pretty much know who they are.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the body on this item 6A? Okay. That brings us to item 6B. I move to direct the administrator to review and update the illegal dumping ordinance, including raising fines up to $5,000, jail time, and community service. There is information in our packet on that item, pages 20 to 29, that appears to be here for our consideration. So I will pause to see if there are questions from the body and if there's any updates from staff.
Madam Chair,
Ms. Brown, you're recognized.
as you review this item, what we can tell you from going through the process where our special services team goes out to a property that has been identified in violation, when that property owner is noticed and goes through the judicial process involving the magistrate, you have two components. One, they have the opportunity to go through that process so that, once they are noticed, if they don't, if they haven't gone to their court date by that time and their property is still in that state, that can be the case. If the magistrate allows them to, tells the individual they have 30 days to comply, to clean it up, that's an additional time frame that they have. And then the county would have to go back out, after that time frame. I know in some recent instances, what we've done is the magistrate has said, if they don't comply within this time frame, you all can go ahead and move forward with your county enforcement. So what I wanted to just share with you that as a part of all of this process, that citizens who are not compliant still have a process that they get to go through while their neighbors are experiencing the challenges of the area that is nuisanced. And so I just wanted to just take a moment to share that with you, because even with the actions that you take, there's still going to be an opportunity in that time frame in which they are going to be given to remediate. And then, as that process kind of carries on, that's what takes place before we can actually go out and step on this private property to take action. So just as you think about, how you want to, address encouraging individuals, just be mindful they still get to go through this process, which unfortunately for their neighbors is a time intensive process. And it does not mean that county staff is not being attentive to the request, but we do have to follow both their rights and the instructions of the magistrates that may also want to provide them additional opportunities before meting out some sort of punitive stance. So that's just a little bit more of about what we're experiencing when you take this to the operational level of when we go in on property and when we take action. The last thing I'll say is when we go on some of these properties, what we've experienced is you have these citizens, and if there is not law enforcement present, they have threatened the lives of our employees. So at that point in time, I'm telling them, do not risk your life. Remove yourself from that site. So as we talk about, these, activities, I'm saying that because these illegal dumpings are not just happening on just the side of the road. They're happening in places where they're in communities, and sometimes you have very bulk items that we believe people see and they place because they know that Richland County at some point in time will come and clean it up, instead of just calling and utilizing the ombudsman to provide that free service for Richland County residents. So it doesn't necessarily address the detail of everything you're looking at, but I want to bring you some larger context to this is happening all the time. We're constantly responding to areas. I have documentation of lots of areas where we've gone out, remediated the blight, and then sometime later, that same area is faced with this nuisance again. And we've taken some other steps, which we don't want to talk about them all here. We've tried to provide surveillance, but I just wanted you to know that this is something that we are hoping to address, but we want to tell you some of the other areas that are going to impact our ability to go onto these properties and deal with some of these things when it is a private property, and maybe somebody is dumping stuff on somebody's private property and the owner is saying it's not me that's doing this stuff. So,
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you.
So I'll acknowledge that, and also acknowledge that it's 5:29. There is now a special called meeting. There's not a special called meeting? Okay, sorry. There's a special called meeting at 5:30. So are there any other quick instructions for staff before we move to the next item on our agenda? It's 6:30? All right, a point of information. Madam Madam Carrillo, what time is the special call meeting? My calendar says 5:30. And I can make eye contact with the chair, but I can't read lips from this far because I don't have my glasses either. What time is the meeting? What time was noticed to the public? How about that?
It was published to the public at 5:30.
Thank you. That brings us to that brings us to
Adjourn.
recognizing Councilwoman English.
Oh.
It was her motion. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Brown, for the work being done on this. I really appreciate it. And thank you for bringing all of those aspects to our attention.
Thank you, Councilwoman English. Councilwoman Barron, did you want to say something?
Move to adjourn.
It's been moved and properly seconded to adjourn our meeting. It is non-debatable, non-deferrable. Madam Clerk.
Pugh,
Yes.
Teratio, Barron,
Yes.
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you.
Recording in progress.